Hope you're doing well tonight. I'm Aaron, here in the Bowtie Treasure Studio, and I'm excited to always be here with you. Tonight we have a great project, as always. Lots of variety, lots of fun that I can share with you. I'm here in Pensacola, Florida. Let us know where you're from. And it's always nice to know how close or how far you are across the country or across the world, wherever it might be. So let's get going. Let me show you what we're working on. Sometimes I like to add a lot of layers. If you've watched many of my lives, you've seen me do a couple layers here and there, but this project, we've gone a little bit extra on the layers. Let me just tell you what I've done so that you can kind of catch up. I think that would help us quite a bit. So I'm going to use my screen here and go to this right here. So step number one, I did Dixie Belle. I cleaned with white lighting and then I used Dixie Belle's gray boss. So that's step one. Okay, again, this is all before tonight. The next step is I applied a coat of burlap. That's the first real color. And if you look closely, you'll actually see that there's some gray peeking through. That's because I purposely did not cover all. I have no problem leaving some of the boss showing. It's part of it might as well act as a color anyway, right? Then I went in around the crevices, edges, and certain areas, cracks, and with vintage duck egg. So you can see that blue color, bluish teal color, is vintage duck egg. The next thing I did is I did a burlap, so I back to burlap and I just did a wash over that. So now you're just seeing the color slightly peek through. So toned it back, but you're getting that depth. That's what we're going for tonight, is depth, and that was really critical. After I did the wash of burlap, I came in there and so basically I used a mixing container like this and for my wash of burlap, and with whatever was left, which was just a little bit, I added probably, I don't know, a couple ounces of burlap. It's really loose, and I just poured some water in there and just winged it. And you can see areas like this. This is me coming in there with the scarlet brush and just applying a little bit of burlap. But remember, the burlap had a little bit of, driftwood with just a little bit of burlap from the leftover wash. So more layers. So now we have burlap, we have vintage duck egg, a little bit of burlap again, wash of driftwood. I'll do my best to keep my colors straight, but I wanted to document where we are tonight because you can see off to the left is the matching dresser. The matching dresser is just a little bit harder to get in camera, so I'm going to focus on the nightstand tonight because I can get all that in the camera really well. And I'll come back later and finish the dresser with the same technique. So when I stage these pictures, you'll know how I accomplished this. There's no way I can do all these layers in one live. I would be spending most of my time with the heat gun, which I actually hopefully not having to use tonight. So hopefully if you have any questions, you'll let me know in the comments. The key here is decide how many layers, what layers would be a wash or actual thick, and then what color mixes. Let's talk just a minute about color harmony. So usually when you're doing something like this, the burlap color is cream. So we would consider, I'm bringing my color wheel, you would consider cream to be in this area, right? I mean, so it's kind of a lighter version. If you go across the color wheel, you're going to get into the complements, which would be your teals. So if you're doing a teal piece or a blue piece, just go across the color wheel and pick up some of the complement. Putting those little complement colors in there really give the eye some fun and just works really well. But just make sure that when you're working with complement colors, the complement is not as strong as the primary color. It's always a secondary, third level usage. So if you're doing 70 or 80% burlap, then do 20%. So just don't do a lot. We're going to keep going here. I've got extra rags tonight, I'm not sure why. Two colors that I have not used yet. The first one is Haint Blue. And I chose Haint Blue just one because it's a lighter color. And remember the complements of that blue is complement. The blue is the complement color of the cream. You can use whatever brush you want. A lot of this I use Dixie, the mini. For the Driftwood mix, I use the Scarlet. So I think what I'd like to do is go ahead and continue at this point and reuse the Scarlet. I still have some of my mix from earlier. I'm just going to set that to the side. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use just a container like this, or whatever you'd like. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll use the water from my mixer bottle just to give me some color, some water. So I'll just pour some water, and trust me, I never really know exactly how much water to put in there. So what I'm gonna do, literally, if you wanna get precise with this because you feel like you're gonna have to replicate the color, then I would get some kind of teaspoon or tablespoon where you can be precise. Most of what I do like this is I'll make notes on a piece of paper, but half the time I'm literally just winging it. So again, water, just gonna pour a little bit in there. Let me get sometimes I'll have something like a little small spatula, but you can also use a little bit of a brush. I wanna keep this thinner. What I'm trying to, I really am doing somewhat of a wash. I will tell you it's easier to add color than it is to take. Once you start this wash, if you have too much paint, you have to add more water. So I would just slowly add the color in there. Better get that lid on there. Have y'all created any kind of layered wash effect before with multiple colors? So I could use my Scarlet brush for this too, but I'm just trying to save my brush from having tons of water and getting too messy. So this works pretty well. This does not have to be thoroughly mixed. With the technique that we're using tonight, it's quite all right if the mix is sporadic, some thin, some thick, because let me show you what I'm talking about. You should be able to see brush strokes, which means that I'm not going for a precise finish, right? So if you're concerned about every brush stroke being hidden, that's not going to be possible with this technique. And I think I can bring you a little closer. So that's why I'm not concerned if I don't get my mix thoroughly mixed up. I'm just showing you how you can obtain layers. I've got a wet rag. Okay, so here we go. I don't think I put enough water in there, so I'm actually going to use my mister bottle because I really want this wet. If you don't like where you're at, you can just put this on there and then add some more water to your mix. Maybe that's a little bit better. I want this thin. You see how I'm using the Scarlet just to get it on there? I'm not trying to, and it doesn't matter if you go left and right, because I'm about to dab a lot of this off anyway. So this is somewhat of a wash, and you might say, aren't you covering up all the work you did? Yes, that's exactly it. When this dries, we will have layers for days, meaning it's almost like a mystery to how was that look achieved. See how I'm getting underneath as well? So if you want to create a custom finish that is not replicatable by, well, I'm not gonna say by yourself, but you just want to have more, you have to do layers. Dry layers, wet layers, stippled layers. Now I could stop right there, but I don't want to hide so much of it. This is where I'm going to add a little bit of texture to it. But only do this if you feel like you need it. So that you could dab it. Other option is you could wipe it off. And I've demonstrated this a little bit. I don't mind this look at all. If you need to, go back to your mixture. And I might just put a little bit more back that, if you felt like you wiped off too much, just make it work. You might check the top. I don't want a hard line at the top. So to give you an example, how that has a little bit, right now it's still wet, so it's going to reflect from the lights, but over here, there's not any of that. Let me get it out of the way of the lights. So let's contrast and work on this side. Let me get my spray bottle again. As I mentioned a while ago, if you want to, you can do this wash and stop. I'm gonna do one more step tonight, just to take it to yet another depth level 6. So many options, so many colors. If you want more of a moody look, go with darker colors, can totally still work. Do you notice that I did not spray this time? I think the first time I just had some of that original paint in my brush and it went on really thick. Right now it feels really nice. I will tell you that when you do something like this, sometimes you just have to trust the dry time as well. Because when it dries, sometimes the transparency will lighten up, meaning more of your layers underneath will show through. And I've proven that to myself on this project already by saying, I went too far. And then like 20 minutes later, I'm like, nailed it. So that's really subtle now. And some of the light colors, let me pull you in. You see how the light colors are kind of becoming a highlight in there? Like a wash wood, that's cool too. Oftentimes I'll come on live and I'll say, we're just gonna make this up as we go. And that's literally what I'm doing. I'm making this up. From a standpoint of, I don't know how much it needs. It's not a technique that I don't do this on every piece. So for the most part, you just have to do it. And then sometimes you do have to let it dry. See, I dipped too far in my wash and I got a lot of the paint in there. If you dip just in the top of your wash, it's going to be less paint. The heavy paint settling to the bottom of my container, that's what's happening. Do you see how I'm just washing right over? I don't worry about the sides of the drawers right now. I'll deal with that later. By the way, the hardware is actually wood, and I will repeat these steps on the hardware later, but I don't like it. It works better for me not to do I always like to take the hardware off, just because it gets in the way of nice, like here, I don't have to dodge hardware, I just go straight across. So that's the advantage of taking the hardware off. Add some water if needed. You want to keep this wet. There we go. So you see how sloppy it is? You can do that because you know you're going to wipe half of it off, so no worries. Let me highlight the front a little bit more and the sides. Rub a little extra on this because it got too much paint. Maybe you go lighter, a little bit more rubbing on where the hardware's going. This is a very, very common traditional set of furniture. In fact, the mirror that goes with the dresser, I actually have in our guest room to go with some other furniture. It's very, very common. So you probably will see these pieces pretty easily out and about when you're shopping or buying these, furniture to repaint. Faux wood. So again, I'm just wiping off, just so I have just enough left to demonstrate the wash. I hate to do the next step, but we're gonna do it because this is how we get creative. This is how we have fun. I'm gonna use Dixie Belle's, one of their craft brushes. It's a little, if you look at, I could use the 1 inch or the flat small, but it's a little bit too much brush. Let me grab Putty. Let me show you the difference between, so on the right is Burlap and on the left is Putty. So it's kind of close. So I'm not going too dark, But I tell you, if you follow my steps and you finish here, you'll have a nice piece. I'm hoping for still a nice piece, but we'll do this gently, cautiously. Thanks, Tammy, for passing that on. Okay, so all I'm trying to do is simulate a little bit of age, dirt, dust, whatever. And as we've been promoting, more depth. Now, in this shading technique, as always, I know you've seen me do it before, but I don't know. It's a staple of my process, so I like sharing it. So let's do this. Let's be gentle with this, meaning I'm not going to put it everywhere. Let's just, as I'm going to steal Tammy's word, let's just sprinkle putty on there, okay? So let's do that. Let's just try it, okay? I'm going to use a little bit of a dry brush. I think that's better because I really do like the white. Can you see the white that I'm talking about? I showed it, but now it's dry. Do you see the white in there? That's from the Haint Blue. That's not from a cream color, that's from Haint Blue. So I'm gonna leave that there. I don't wanna lose it. I think it's pretty cool. And again, this is the kind of thing that you just do it and you discover, wow, I had no idea. And you just roll with it. So we're just gonna do this. So I'm just gonna touch, I said sprinkle, I'm not really sprinkling. I'm just gonna drag my brush, light, feathery touch. You're just looking, much like I did with the vintage duck egg, I'm just looking for small places to drag this and add some depth. Almost as if, and you could do this, almost as if I am just faux distressing. That's the word I'm looking for. Flat brush, just a few here and there. I don't want it to be super noticeable. Remember, this is putty, so as I just showed you, there's not a lot of value contrast. Just so light, okay? You can use whatever size brush you want. You can bust out the scarlet or anything flat, I would say, would do fine here. But I think I'm liking this. This is gonna give me the look I need without filling in any of the crevices that I just put Haint Blue in. And Tammy, you're complimenting the colors. It really is, you kind of just have to follow your gut a little bit with your color harmony and your palette and say, okay, I'm gonna go with more of a warm tone with a couple, and then you ask yourself, where can I put some complement? And that's where the vintage duck egg came in to me. And then also the Haint Blue is also a complement. So those two things will really highlight your piece. So there's the corner. So you can see it's starting to dry and get a little darker, which I'm fine with that. Like I said, I'm probably gonna come back and just slightly touch that with sandpaper because I want it to be a little bit more worn. So the goal tonight was to create a cozy, layered piece, and you just have to decide when you're gonna start. I'm just showcasing, like we put this putty here, this putty could be buttercream or cotton if you wanna go lighter. Like if you want more of a fresher look, that would work too. You could stop at any point. So remember, let me go back through those. I bossed it, painted it burlap. Then I did the touch of vintage duck egg around all the edges. Did another wash of burlap to tone that down. And then tonight I showed you that I had put driftwood on it with the scarlet brush. And then we did the Haint Blue wash, and then we did Putty. So those are the color steps that I put Putty on there. Unfortunately, after it dried, I really wasn't happy with it. So I kind of disguised it a little bit, but I got to thinking that as much as I didn't like it, to be consistent, I'm gonna go ahead and put it on this piece, maybe not as much, and I'm still gonna go back and disguise it. Some ways I did that, I mentioned last night I was gonna do some light sanding, and then I used a little bit of a burlap over it and a touch of the wash. Since the live and the project's all about washes, I thought I'll just put some more layers on it. So, I mean, it's all about layers. So I think it came out really well. And so again, I'm owning it, just like anything else. You gotta own it, right? If it doesn't work out, improvise. And my improvisation was to continue the layers. And I think it came out looking really nice. When you look closely, you can't see the putty as much as I had after last night. But I like where we are. I also mentioned in my live that I really like where it's at right now. But in the furniture artist life of being creative, sometimes you maybe take it too far, or you do a little extra, and that's okay. And I still like where I'm at, but I didn't leave it, is what I'm saying. So what I'm trying to get out is I didn't leave it with the putty only, and I think that gave me more layers and more depth and more interest. So if you want to know the colors, there they are running across the bottom. And now, in my previous live, I did mention the steps as far as boss, a coat of burlap, shading, or at least putting vintage duck egg around, another wash of burlap, then a wash with the scarlet brush of driftwood and a touch of burlap, a really wet wash. And then we did Haint Blue wash, and then we came back with a touch of putty. So this already has the Haint Blue wash. And you can see that. Let me bring you guys back in again. You can see the Haint Blue here. That little kind of, in my room right now, on my eyes, it's a little bluish of a highlight. So I don't want to get rid of that. In fact, I was going to do some shading with putty, but when I saw that, I'm like, that really looks good. So overall, we're set to just finish up the putty. And then I want to show you, if I can do it, I'll demonstrate as much as I can how to hide some of that. And for the putty last night, I believe I used a craft brush. And I'm going to go ahead and use a 1-inch brush because it's a bigger piece. And I think it'd be good to go a little deeper. Basically, as I demonstrated last night, I did a lot of flat, like almost parallel with the piece. And if you need to get a paper towel or something to wipe off some extra. So I just want to be careful with this. I'm just going to touch it here and there, and it's going to be very subtle, not a lot. And as I was concerned about last night, it did dry much darker, and it was just a little too green for me. So you can see it starting to come in there. And let me just show you how much that's coming in. You see it in there? And as it dries darker, it'll stand out more. And the green tones of the putty came out. But we need to own it. We need to do it. So we're just going to continue this. And so just kind of hitting it here and there. I think that's enough. I say damage. That's enough of putty. It gives us just a little bit of imperfection dirt. And now we get to cover it up. And let's get prepared. In order to be prepared, the first thing I had was a little bit of a wash. Just a touch. Just a touch of color. Well, that's more than a touch, but that's some water. And I think it would be good. Let's do another 1 inch, okay? And I'm just gonna mix this up. always spill this. Do you remember, if you watched the previous live, I did some dabbing. So what I can do here is I can just kind of come in here and go over the putty that's there. Same idea, so like that. Let me show you closer. Remember, this is a wash, so there's the wash right there. Now what we can do is just dab it. This is adding texture. If you want, you can even go over it a little bit like that again and just lightly wipe it off. That'll tone down that color a little bit. So you can even dab it if you want. It's all about layers. It's just what do you want it to do? So in order to make them both work together, I'm repeating those steps again. Okay. I do have it, this is a slightly damp rag. And so far so good. So just make them look like, if you follow the steps though, right? You should have a general idea. So I'm dabbing in such a way that I'm almost vignetting this wash. Remembering that, and I like to highlight where the knob's going. So I'll do that, a little bit of that too. It's still there. If you look closely, I'm not really getting rid of it. I'm just layering it and pushing it back in distance. You can do this in whatever brush you want. You could probably even apply the wash with like a sponge. Someone mentioned a sponge last night. Whatever gives you the texture and the wash you want. Do my best to stay out of the camera and the light. So anywhere I put putty, I'm doing this technique. And then also in the hardware area. I think I forgot this one. Some of you may not be 100% fan of the wood hardware, but it was kind of the way this furniture looked. And I don't mind it. It does have a nice, kind of a casual feel to it. It's not, the hardware doesn't demand attention. So I just feels nice and cozy, and that's what I'm going with. So overall, most of that original putty I put on there is really more or less it's disguised. The only thing left that I did was burlap. This is just another layer. So I'm just gonna do a lot of that, just a little bit of paint. We'll work right here. And here, we're not removing, we're just overlaying a little bit, almost crisscross if you want. I will come back and do a light. It's a little too much paint. And if you want, you can even dab that too. And I think I will. So you're just looking for opportunities to bring in the original color. I think the piece could use a little bit of the original color anyway, but I'm purposely putting it over, hiding a little bit of the... I think this is the first time I've ever showed you all me trying to fix something. You can see a little bit of the putty, but remember, it's got a wash, so here we go. Trying to hide that. And because the putty's even darker than the wash we just did, so this warm tone of the original color will add some more depth, because it's a color that you're really not seeing much of because we've covered it up so many times. So I think that's a nice look. I think we're done. Do you see that? So the only thing I need to do now is let all this dry really well. And then I will come back with the sanding sponge and just give it a light sand, because it'll start feeling a little bit like sandpaper because it's got kind of dry brush layers on it. But I'm pretty happy with this. This makes me happy when I can see 6, 7 layers all come together for a unified look. Well, that's it for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. Always happy to share my techniques with you here in the Bowtie Treasure Studio. If you have any questions, let me know. If you're watching a replay, I'll always love to know that. Until next time, be creative, do something awesome, and thank you so much for watching. Take care.
That's the end of the show. Make sure you subscribe and ring the bell before you go. Bye.